I'll introduce Joan Nichols for anyone who doesn't know her. She's, in my opinion, she's the guru of Public Act 490. She did a lot of work for Farm Bureau, and I guess did you publish that, Joan, or the 490 guide?
Excuse me, Blackie?
Pardon?
I said, I didn't hear what you said. If everybody can mute themselves other than who's speaking, because you were just interrupted by somebody, I didn't hear you.
All right, well, I was just introducing you and saying that you were the guru of Public Act 490. And I'll just stop there and turn the floor over to you and you can start.
Sure. Thank you, Blackie, and thank you for inviting me to this evening's meeting. I'm assuming everybody can hear and see me okay?
Oh,
Yes?
yeah, we're doing fine on this end.
Okay, all right, good, because all I see is a room full of people. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes to talk a little bit about Public Act 490. And it's my understanding from the correspondence going back and forth that this is really a discussion about the open space classification, which is what's considered a municipal option. So the farmland classification and the forest land classification is not a municipal option. If the land and the applicant filed for the farmland or forest land classification, it meets criteria by state statute, then the town should be granting the classification. So I'm not really going to spend too much time on farmland or forest land unless you want me to. The open space classification is what's considered a municipal option. And what the open space classification in the statutes, the state statutes sort of provide the framework for how a municipality should adopt the open space classification. It gives a definition for open space, but it's a very broad definition and includes wildlife habitat, woodlands, grasslands, speaks to providing tax relief for those properties that could meet the open space classification. But the state statute does not go, unlike farmland and forest land, the state statute does not go into particulars, nor does the state of Connecticut set the values for open space, unlike farmland and forest land, where the state of Connecticut Office of Policy and Management, Department of Agriculture, Division of Forestry, develop the 490 values every 5 years for farmland and forest land. That is also left up to the municipality. So it's really up to each individual town to decide whether they want to adopt the open space classification or not, and why they would. And then the statute gives you the guidelines on how to do it, which is basically first to identify that the town wants to adopt the PA 490 open space in your plan of conservation and development. And we always urge you, if you're going to go down this road, anytime you're referring to PA 490 open space in ordinances or in relation to tax assessment or in your plan of conservation development, that you reference the statute, because the term open space, as many of you can imagine, has many, many connotations. It could be, open space could be the land that was required to be set aside as part of an approved subdivision, if that's what the town does and they want X number of acres set aside for open space as a subdivision approval. It could be a municipally owned land. It could be, publicly held land. It could be land that has some sort of easements on it. So you want to be very clear that this is land that's held in private ownership, but would have a reduced tax benefit under Public Act 490. So you want to be clear on how you define it in your plan of conservation development. Once it's identified in your POCD as something that the town wants to pursue, then you would, work some numbers with your grand list. You would have a discussion amongst the taxpayers in town as to what your ordinance may look like. which parcels should be eligible for open space, whether it's the entire town, whether you do it by geographical locations within town, by certain roads, but generally you also have to identify where in town you're going to allow land to be assessed as open space. And then you need to develop an ordinance. And the tighter the ordinance is, and the more clearly defined the criteria, the better off you are. Because the biggest problem that we've seen on the open space classification are those towns that did it a little loosely, and then the assessor retires or leaves, and that causes a lot of problem because people can't find ordinances as land transfers from one property owner to another. As you well know, 490 doesn't run with the land, it runs with the owner. So anytime there's a transfer of land and the new owner comes along, if they want to apply for open space and a new assessor comes in and nobody can find the criteria, that causes problems. So the cleaner you make this for the better for the assessor, the taxpayers, everybody knows what the expectations are. You identify that all in a well-written ordinance that's then approved by your legislative authority. And then the other thing that the town has to decide is the formula or what value you're going to utilize for land that goes into the open space classification. So that's sort of the broad brush of how open space works. There's about 30 municipalities in the state right now that offer the open space classification. And I did provide Tiro with that list, as well as many of the ordinances as I've been able to accumulate from those towns that do the open space classification, to give you some ideas of what the ordinances look like. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions, or you can move on to the rest of your agenda.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Joan? And this is open, not like a planning and zoning meeting, not just us that can talk. We want input from, that's what this meeting's about.
Does Joan know what we're facing here in town?
She knows that we're considering having the Public Act 490 open space. I mean, we're contemplating doing that. Is that what you mean?
Well, I have a problem with you saying that you're contemplating doing it, because my land has been an open space since 1979. And from what I understand, in searching through records, we can't find the ordinance, right? The ordinance is missing, although then someone located when it was instituted. So Joan, I'd just like your opinion of whether or not you believe it's realistic for the taxpayers, landowners, to think that we should have a say in whether or not this is changed. I don't see the purpose of changing it. I don't know what problems they've had. I know what the town is proposing is to actually, they decide what districts will qualify for the PA490. Which, why should you guys, why wouldn't you, and I just want Joan's opinion on this, why wouldn't you poll the current landowners that are under that program and see what they would like to do?
All right. Do you want to explain how?
Have you ever come across anything like this?
Well, in this process in the last week or so, in fact, I just got a hint of it in the last day or so. I guess in Thompson, we don't have farmland, Public Act 490 farmland, or Public Act 490 forest land. All the land was put into somewhere, one of the assessors did that. And I don't know whether Paul wants to try and address that. Are you there, Paul?
Yes, I can try and address that.
Good.
So it looks to me like I went through the applications that were filed, And the applications were actually, most that I can find were applied for on an open space application, not a farm application or a forestry application. And they've been coded without using an open space valuation. The valuation that's been used for all of the open space categories is just the farmland classification. So it's really, it's hard to determine who has what, for the reason that it was really done all as open space, but valued as farmland. And to go back to the original comment, what we have to do is we have to follow statute. As an assessor, I have to follow statute. So to have something that's may or may not have been put in place at some point in time is really tough for me, because like Joan said, as an assessor, we need clear, defined rules and regulations that we can follow. We're not a legislative body as an assessor, we're an administrator. So we simply administer the laws and regulations that are put through by the state and our local municipality.
We have been functioning this way for probably 50 years. So what I don't understand, I mean, you obviously have evidence that this program was in place. I can understand what you're saying about classifying the land correctly. So why can't you go into each person's open space plan and assess their land however you want to do it? But why would you turn around and take away anyone's right to have their land in the PA 490? I don't even understand why we're talking about this. I'm here because I'm upset about a lot of things that are happening. And I know it's your job to assess, so assess, categorize it, but don't take it away. Don't tell us now you have to define areas in town where you're actually going to approve this.
All right, theoretically, if we need to straighten this mess out, and I think this is one of the things that we need to get straightened out is, first of all, there's no, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but you really don't have the authority to be giving anybody, farmers or anyone this, I mean,
Just the open space.
Right, I have we have the authority to grant farm applications and forestry applications, because that's a state requirement. But right now, I don't have, as the assessor, I don't have the authority to approve an open space application.
Well, this is,
but we have to correct the,
we have to correct it, period.
you have everything's miscategorized or all categorized as open space. You don't have a breakdown farmland to forest land or open space. Is that correct?
Correct. But what I can do is everybody who's an operating farm in the town has to file a personal property declaration. So I can find out, I can cross-reference all our 490 landowners with their personal property record, and I can find those that would be classified under the farm application. I can then cross-reference the total acreage owned by a person and see if they would classify under the forestry application. So we can clean a lot of this up by simply, by me simply looking through the records that we already have to kind of differentiate who should be farm, who should be forest. And then whenever the open space is kind of settled out, I can figure out who has, where the open space goes. And if we set a value for that, then we can adjust the value accordingly.
But and just to be perfectly clear, Paul, you still have no authority to let anybody new into the program because we have no ordinance on record.
Correct. That's correct. I can't prove an open space application without the language being in place.
But as a town, we have the right to adopt an ordinance to do so, correct?
That's what we're working on. That's what the meeting
That's
tonight
what
is
this
about.
whole
You guys
process
just need to
is.
decide to adopt it. What I'm saying is, why would you change it and decide that you're going to do it by district? Why would you do that? So you get to say who gets to have their land in open space and who doesn't.
So the way the statute is written, it says that the municipalities have to designate the areas. It doesn't say what areas. And there are, I think, a couple of towns, and Joan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that have indeed said the whole town is eligible. However,
Exactly.
that isn't necessarily the direction that the town would want to go for a couple of reasons. Remember that it is a tax assessment reduction. That doesn't mean the tax burden for the town goes away. Every dollar that's reduced for one parcel gets spread out to the other people who don't have access to that, meaning they don't have enough property to enter.
Listen,
So
I
you
beg
have
to differ with you.
potential for the mill
You are
rate to go
splitting
up.
hairs. You are splitting hairs. The bottom line is what you're going to do. I know exactly what you're going to do.
No, you don't. Now,
You'll turn
why don't
around
you let
and
her finish
subdivide
talking?
areas, and then we're gonna have triple deckers on quarter-acre lots. We'll have more kids. No taxes are actually going to go down for people, or the town isn't gonna be getting any more taxes by charging people. Valerie?
I have a couple of questions I would like to ask.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion that people talk and identify themselves, their address, please?
We'll do that.
Who are you?
That's John Rice. Now,
I wanted to make sure the chairman authorizes that suggestion I have. I am John Rice, 39 East Thompson Road. Thank you.
thank you, John.
I-
Valerie, you can-
Valerie Clark, and I just want to give some background firstly that since I was the one that brought this concern to light, I want to ask Joan, is an ordinance required?
Yeah, if somebody could repeat the question, because if it's coming from the big room, it's a little hard to hear. So Blackie, maybe you could repeat the question.
All right. Is an ordinance required? And the answer is yes, we have the town has to adopt an ordinance to approve the open space part of Public Act 490. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it has to be identified in your plan of conservation development, and then you do need an ordinance because you need to be able to set your criteria so that the assessor can administer the classification. Without an ordinance or without a criteria, how does the assessor administer the applications and know whether to approve or not approve the applications if there's no criteria?
Okay, you have more to ask, Valerie?
Yes, well.
This is the mic or whatever over here,
Yeah,
so.
I'm gonna come up and I apologize. I understand that I'm typically very soft-spoken. If anybody can't hear me, please let me know. I just kind of want to set let's say, maybe an agenda for the meeting tonight in a way, given that what we want to do and what we've kind of established here is to look at restoring. So I want to thank Joan for her time and her presentation tonight. She's a very, very well-respected member of many agricultural areas and Connecticut Farm Bureau. She helped establish this committee that is here in the room tonight, the Agricultural Commission in Thompson.
And in there.
So she's here to help us understand all the complexities and the nuances of PA 490 and in particular the open space provision. And as we understand it better, I want to make sure that everyone here understands that the issue that I brought to light and have asked to address has fundamentally very little to do with PA 490 and everything to do with doing the right thing. The open space program that's been administered in good faith by multiple assessors in town for decades has been taken away from the townspeople, and most of them aren't even aware that the change has happened. Over 50% of the properties in town were covered under the open space program according to the Plan of Conservation and Open Space. That coverage has been taken away not with the townspeople's permission, not by a vote, not communicated openly to the townspeople, but by discovery of an omission, lack of an ordinance, in execution on the part of the town. The people of the town of Thompson have expressed in multiple forums their distrust and lack of confidence in the elected officials, the employees and commissioners on the various boards, and in particular, the Planning and Zoning Commission. The right thing to do in service of the townspeople is to restore the program they thought was in place all this time and to begin to restore the faith they are being represented fairly and in the best interests, their best interests are being protected. This is why we need to work to restore the open space program in town before the end of the fiscal year. The way it was originally written in 1979 by the Planning and Zoning was 3 acres of undeveloped land in town being eligible to be covered under the open space program. This provision benefits not only the town and the townspeople because of the reduction in costs supporting the infrastructure. I'm asking the Agriculture Commission and the members, hopefully, of the Planning and Zoning Commission to do the right thing. It's not the time to talk and nitpick about acreage or type of acreage, or what area in town we might envision each of us to or desire to be covered under the program. It's time to restore people's faith in the town government and restore the open space program, keeping it the way it was. Thank you.
Okay, Paul, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so we're trying to rectify something that's gone awry somewhere, but just to clarify this, nobody's being penalized at this point, is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm
Right.
sorry, I was.
We haven't,
Salary
we haven't removed any benefits, but,
turned down and rejected.
right,
Well, open space,
like we talked about, I haven't removed any, but any new application under the open space has not been approved, which is what we need to correct.
well, so Valerie hopefully is the only one that is in jeopardy at the moment, but at this point, all the parcels in town that you qualified, they're not getting penalized unless we should get this straightened out so you can get a complete list and new applications for the 1st of October. Is that correct?
Right, we need to get everything set and in place by the end of the fiscal year. So that way, when the application period begins October 1st, that we can accept and approve the new open space applications.
Okay, thank you.
Ray's got a hand up. Somebody else just had one up. And Diana has a hand
Hi,
up.
Diana.
Hi, Diana Kuchar, 655 Fabian Road. Being in the town and the assessor for years and years, can I just speak to?
Sure can.
The Planning and Zoning Commission did have in 1979 open space. And I have in writing. I mean, well, in the minutes, I have the
We
minutes.
had Public Act 490, was the open space portion done as well?
Yeah, open space was addressed in the minutes.
Can you get me
And
a
it
copy of that, Diana?
clarified 3 acres or more. And what happened, I'm thinking Paul was nice enough to give me a hand. I knew it was in my record. So when they passed this, a week later, the state statute amended to make it necessary, it goes to an ordinance. It was not in the original statute, I don't believe. Later, it was done as an amendment to the statute. The town somehow flipped, whoever was in back in those days, just didn't realize, they didn't take those minutes and get an ordinance done. So I think it was just an oversight on the part of the assessor at the time that he didn't pursue it once that statute got changed. That's my opinion.
That was
Because
right.
for years, I mean, I never thought to question somebody like Sonny Reynolds or my predecessors as to, why they were giving out open space. When I started, it was something like this is what to do. you know?
Right.
And I think it goes back to about the time you're talking about, well,
Right,
79.
And this is Paul Hopkins. And I just wanted to confirm with Diana, what Diana said is that we went through and we looked, we found the Planning Zoning Commission's component where they at a regular meeting passed or tried to pass this, but they failed to do to complete the statutory requirements for open space. So they, although they got partway there, they just never finished it.
So Paul, I've still not seen those minutes. Valerie and I think it was, you were working on that with Valerie too. I think Brenda had looked through some stuff and given Renee a date that we couldn't find in the town clerk's record. But if you have a copy of that, can you scan that to me tomorrow from the office?
Diana?
I can do it. Yeah, I have it in the office. I can do it.
Thank you.
You have it with me now, Diana? I do.
Oh, thanks, Cindy. So never mind, Paul. Cindy's going to copy some for me.
All right, so now I'm not just sure. We've got that resolved, so now we've got to just move forward so that we can rectify this, right?
Right. So we still need to follow procedurally that which is required by statute. And what the statute requires is that you identify the areas of town. That could be all of town, or it could be not quite all of town. And that's part of what these guys are here to discuss. And then the criteria also need to be described. You know, the purpose of the statute is actually not the tax reduction. The purpose of the statute is the preservation of the open space, and the tax reduction is the incentive to get people to do it. So, you know, not all land actually has open space value. Not all areas of town are particularly suited to open space preservation. That's what, you know, we have to look at the map, decide if there's continuity. Joan, I think you mentioned that typically the areas that are considered eligible are residential districts as opposed to a mixed use or a commercial district, right? So there's examples of areas you might not want to include. Now, I can tell you that there's some complications with that because of the way historically Thompson has configured its commercial parcels. So it is complex. But anyway, so the areas of town have to be identified, and they have to be identified in the Plan of Conservation and Development. That's in the statute. So if it wasn't done before, it needs to be done now so that it will be correct going forward, so that new property owners will have access to the program, or anybody who is currently enrolled in the program who sells or passes land on, those people would also have access. Because as Joan mentioned, the benefit runs with the owner, not with the land. As soon as ownership changes, the benefit is nullified. So, you know, in
Then
order
we
to have it
reapply.
correct,
Then we reapply.
you can only reapply if we go through the steps and have the ordinance in place.
And that's what we need to do. That's the first step tonight.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. You're going to reinstitute the program, but as you're going to do it, I heard talk about what your plans are and all of this defining the areas.
Well,
I think you need to just skip it.
I think perhaps you should listen to
the.
the people talking here and not the people chattering out
I
in
don't know
the
what your
stratosphere.
source of
Because
information
the
is.
information is from
French
here.
Romantic 131 Passay Road.
Thank
I
you.
would just like to say something to Mr. Blackmer. I was at the planning and zoning meeting the other night and heard you say, I don't see why the townspeople would want the PA 490 anyway.
I
because
don't think you heard that. Where's the tape?
listen, You said, other than farmland or forest land, why would they need this?
I did not say that. I don't
I
know.
think we need to go back to the tape. So the bottom line is, whatever your words were, that was pretty much what was said. That
No,
was
it
the gist of
wasn't.
it. Yes, it was.
Okay, that's enough. If you got something that's factual, you can say it. But I did not say that. I'm in favor of, I'm game for people to be able to have open space. And I'm tired of you
Mr. Blackmer.
telling me all the things that I
Your-
supposedly
your
said and
words
haven't.
were that you didn't understand why they would need something if it wasn't forest or farmland. It was very quick,
No,
brief.
there's another one. I did not say that.
I think we need to go back to the minutes,
Well,
not the written minutes,
we're
but the
not gonna
minutes
do
on the
that.
tape.
We're not gonna do that in this meeting.
The
These are
bottom
extra
line
copies.
is, the
Pass
whole,
down to
the
Art.
whole point behind this is you're forgetting about the fact that there are some people out there that don't qualify as a farm, don't qualify as a forest.
We're trying to rectify that, and you're just wasting our time. We'll work on that, and that's what we're trying to work on tonight. And I wish you'd just stop putting words in, trying to say things that I said that I did not.
Then you guys should not be saying what you think the taxpayers want, which is
I
don't.
didn't say
You
that.
need to poll the people that are currently in this program and see what they think.
Well,
Why do they
we're
have
gonna
an
do
open
that
space?
before we move
Listen,
forward.
I don't need the tax break. I have 92 acres of land and I don't need the tax break.
Okay, well, then you
My
can pay your
land is in-
taxes.
My
No,
land is in
I'll
open
be
space.
perfectly happy to
My
have you take
land
your
is
money.
in open space because I want to preserve it.
Okay,
And
All right,
lots of
Brenda.
other people
yours
feel that
will
way as
still be
well.
qualified
Brenda.
after we finish this, but if we don't, you won't be
You
eligible.
you do need to finish it. You don't need
Well,
to
we
change.
can't do it if you're just
anything.
gonna keep,
You don't need to change
Yes,
anything,
we
is
do.
what I'm saying.
Valerie?
So if I might, I'd like to read the copy that I have. Diana, please correct me if I'm not reading it correctly. I would like to propose as wording that we propose the wording that was used at the P and Z meeting in 1979. And this is, in order to prevent the forced sale of land, the commission adopts as a part of their plan of development for the town, a statement which declares those tracts in excess of a given acreage and unbuilt on or undeveloped to be critical to the preservation of the environment in town. This action will enable those landowners who are not eligible for either the farm or forest use assessment to be eligible for a lower assessment on their land. Motion was made by Bruce Seeger, seconded by Donald Hayes, to set the minimum acres for open space in Thompson at 3 acres. And the motion carried and it was unanimously agreed. I would like to propose that in order to restore the program.
That you're making that to the Ag Commission.
That I would like to propose that the Ag Commission recommend that as the wording to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
That, all right,
Point of order. Gentleman over here has had his hand up
I'm
4 or
sorry.
5 times and has been interrupted repeatedly by people who are not
Okay.
raising their hands and not asking to speak.
all right.
I'm sitting right here.
Who's
This gentleman, right here.
Hi, Ray.
Ray Williams, 190 Forest Lane Road. I don't see why, if the town has been letting people do this open space, why, this clock, right?
Yeah.
Why she has to be denied something that she's already had, and anybody else should have to wait that's already had it. There's no reason why our assessor should be holding them back.
Because it wasn't properly done, Ray. And
Yes, but she was
wherever,
already in this. She was already there. So that should already be pushed through. It's been pushed through for years, and there's no reason to not do it now.
That would be between you and the assessor and Valerie. As far as I didn't know that this wasn't happening, and this isn't something that the Ag Commission we're trying to rectify the whole
I
situation.
understand that. I just don't think that it's right that they,
So if
that she be held back.
Paul Hopkins, assessor. What
Yep.
I would just like to add to that, this parcel wasn't in open space. This was a new application on property that had never been classified. So this wasn't something that I removed and then rejected to be put back on. This was just a parcel of land that had never been part of the 490 program.
I'm sorry, it was a 1 acre building lot within a 4 acre parcel that had already been classified as open space. The building that was on it had been removed. And I wanted to make the whole lot open space and
Okay, I
undeveloped.
misunderstood.
yeah,
Right,
so
then-
there is exactly the problem, Ray, is that people making new applications currently can't have access to it because for whatever
Yeah,
reason, whether it
I
was because of the
misunderstood that.
statutory change or whatever, we don't have the mechanism in place to allow people new access to the program. And that's the first thing we have to do. It also needs to be clear that there are 3 approving bodies here in play. The planning and zoning has to approve the amendment to the plan of conservation and development. I don't expect any problem with that. Then it's got to pass the Board of Selectmen, and then it's got to go to town meeting. I also wouldn't expect any trouble with the town meeting. There's been a great deal of enthusiasm expressed for it. So in terms of setting the criteria, and another thing that you want to think about is you want to propose something that will pass the Board of Selectmen scrutiny as well, right? And they may have different concerns than the Agriculture Commission or the Planning and Zoning Commission, because they have to look at the tax base.
I just misunderstood. I thought that she had a application that was, where 10 years was up.
Sure.
Is what I thought.
Anna?
I just have one more question as far as you're talking the criteria and maybe only certain sections would be allowed versus the whole town. Well, little did I know that my farmland, which is listed as important farm soils on the map in Connecticut, is now a commercial property. So what happens to something like that? Is that going to get looked at like, oh, that's commercial now zone, so now they're out of the picture?
Well, that's exactly why I said there's
And
complications.
that really bothers me.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, if you've got important land in this town, it shouldn't be.
yeah, that's exactly why I said it was complicated. If you actually, and I started to do this today and I didn't get very far because there's so many of them. Paul ran a spreadsheet for me with all of the parcels, all of them that are registered, whether properly or improperly, in the PA 490 program. There's over 1,000 of them. And some of them are in business zones and have always been in business zones. So that's why I say there are complications, because ideally you do want your districts that you set aside for mixed use or commercial development to be available for that, right? So you don't want to restrict that use either. However, obviously there are already parcels in there. So how do we craft that language? That's why I'm saying it's complex. It's not, this is a good start. And I would agree that it's generally a place we should, begin with. But then beyond that, how do we make sure that it's actually serving all the needs? There are multiple needs to be balanced. We hear all the time, I hear in my office all the time, what are you doing for economic development in town? Well, if we lock up parcels of land in the areas that we've targeted for that development, then we've raised one goal over the other, right? We've got to come to the right balance. So that's all the process is. It's not trying to take anything away. If there are people in the program, we'll find a way to get that included. It may just not be as simple as something we can resolve here, especially if people are being heated about it, instead of saying, what are the competing interests? Where is the balance that's going to be right for Tom? And no single one of us has that answer, but together we can come to that answer. That's the whole point of public dialogue. Valerie.
And I don't want to go ahead of anybody else, and other people have things that they feel they need to say, but just in response to restricting areas and not making them available for open space, I feel that there are enough incentives to develop land that this tax reduction is not going to be significant enough, just having it in open space, to overcome the other economic incentives to develop in a commercial district or a housing area that has been designated. But that it is up to the landowner whether they want to have that area developed or not. And if they are in an area like Diana's describing, where she's got acreage in an area that might have been designated for development, it's up to her if she wants to be allowed to preserve that property, and she should be as equally eligible as someone who is living next to Kaiser's Farm.
All right, Diana, Joan, are you still on?
Yes, I am, Blackie.
Okay. To Diana's question, just because her land is, on the map as zoned commercial, that land's been farmed since, before I moved to town, which is 60 years ago. Her land can still be classified as, agriculture, Public Act 490 farmland and get the, assessment for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, because you have to think about that, the 490 classification for farmland, or even you can have forest land in commercial and industrial zones. As long as it's a current use tax, so as long as the use of the land is farming, agriculture, or meets the criteria for forest land, which is 25 acres or more of woods, then it doesn't matter what the zone lot size, the commercial zone is, commercial or industrial. If the use of the land is farming or forest land, and I would, defer to your assessor on that, but that's always been our understanding. Because more often than not, the farmland or the forest land was there long before the town rezoned it for commercial or industrial use.
Hi, Paul Hopkins, the assessor. Joan's correct. So there's nothing in the actual statute for farm or forest that dictates that a parcel has to be in a residential zone or a mixed use zone. So zoning is not a component of either of those applications.
Valerie?
So have to keep jumping up so that people can hear me.
You get your steps in.
Get my steps. So my question's for Joan, and can you talk about why on the farmland and forest applications, there's an income box that has to be filled out? And can you talk about what I understand is the requirement to have a state certified forester for forest land and the requirement to be actively farming and how that's interpreted, please?
Sure. Before I answer those questions, I'm just going to defer to your chairman to see if you want me to dive into the forest land or farmland classification. I'm happy to, but it was my understanding your focus was on open space. So it's up to you, Blackie, whether you want me to answer those questions or not.
The focus was on open space, but go ahead and answer those questions.
Okay, so for the farmland classification, yes, on the application, there is a box that asks for gross income derived from farming, type of farming operation, type of equipment. And that's because the PA 490 farmland classification is meant for production agriculture. And within the statutes, there's a section called factors to consider, where the assessor is required to look at the farming operation to see if there's income being derived from the farm, what type of equipment, productivity of the land, how much of the land is in active agricultural production, et cetera, to give the assessor a picture that this is part of some sort of farming enterprise versus personal use. On the forest land classification, there is no income requirement under the forest land classification. That doesn't exist for forest land. However, the statute was amended a few years ago when the state sort of privatized the application process. And now, in order to qualify for forest land, you have to hire a certified qualified forester that's gone through the credentials with DEP. And they need to produce what's called a qualified forester's report, which is a standardized form that's provided to all foresters by the state of Connecticut. And they have to go out in the field, collect field data, complete the report along with associated maps. And that report has to be dated on or before October 1st. And that report needs to accompany any forest land application which is filed between September 1st and October 31st.
Okay,
Does
Paul,
that
you
answer
still-
your questions?
Yes, that was good. Thank you, Joan. Paul,
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, the reason if it's someone who owns a farm and they're applying for the first time, you want to see the Schedule F is all you care. You don't care if there's any numbers on it. You just want to see their name on a Schedule F. Is that correct?
Correct.
Or
So there's no specifically in the 490 statute, there's no income number. So what we would ask for is just a Schedule F showing that they are showing the IRS that they are an operating farm. So I won't be looking for a gross total income or a loss or whatnot when we're looking at the applications. It's just, we asked for the Schedule F as part of our package to determine if it's a productive farm, meaning that that's an operational activity. The one,
how do you-
ca- the
and how do you
caveat,
handle the land that somebody is renting? Someone is not, well, Valerie's not doing the work herself, but she rents her land to Kaisor. What do you require for her to show that that land's being used for agricultural purposes? And that still qualifies, is that correct?
that's correct. So on the application, there's a second page that has a section for rented land. So if a homeowner is renting their land to a farmer for saying hay purposes or some other production for the farm, that would qualify under the original farmer's application and then approved for that parcel of land, as long as the farmer is utilizing that for his farming production.
Does that answer your question, Valerie?
My question, and so if I were to say, go get my steps in. If I were to say that there's a requirement that this be farmed as a business to qualify as farmland. And if I were to say it also has to have been filed on taxes in the prior year. And if I were to say that someone moved here, purchased land this year, new to Connecticut, and had not yet started farming the farmland, they could not apply this year until they had a tax document. Is that correct?
Assessor Paul Hopkins, that's not correct. So if they've gone through the process and they've purchased farming equipment, they've purchased land, they purchased their livestock, they've done everything else, but this is the first year that they've done it. The statute is clear that the assessor doesn't have to take one component of any of this into consideration. So what I would do in that circumstance is I would require the farm to submit all the other supporting documentation as to what they're doing for the operational farm and put a caveat onto that application that the first year that they file their Schedule F, we would need that document added to the file.
Okay.
They do have to be a business.
Well, if they're starting a business, they're a business. If it's
That's
not
the question.
Yeah, I know why she's asking. There is something specifically in the guidebook for PA 490 that says the farmland exemption is not intended for hobby farms or homesteaders, essentially. It is for people having with a farm business or other kind of income generating or income losing consideration. This gentleman's been a while,
I'm sorry,
Ray. Let him go first, and then you.
name,
Dave Clark, 105 Home Road, Thompson, and
Okay.
Valerie Clark. Not that we agree on things, generally, we are married. But I just want to go on a couple of things that have been said here tonight and kind of drive some points home. As you said, open space benefits the town. The tax break is an incentive to the person. Now, there's nothing that says that a person who has open space can't develop their land. They can. They can go 9 years, develop the land, and they owe 9 years of back taxes.
no, that's not quite right.
That's how it was when I moved here 40 years ago. If you got open space, you had 10 years of the tax break. And the tax break continues, but if you altered your land in that 10-year period, you owed the back taxes for that space being open space.
Don't correct me
is
if
a
I'm wrong,
penalty
there's
if
a
it's
tax
inside the 10
recapture
years.
that is 10%. If you sell that property in 5 years, there's a 10% tax recapture that starts out, if you sell it in the first year, it's 10% of the sales price. You sell it in the second year, it's a 9% tax down to
I'm not
9
saying
years.
sell it, I'm saying develop it. If I change the use of
Well,
my
okay,
property,
you change the use, it'll
I
still,
change the use of my
Yeah.
property. I
okay,
had open space, I've got 400 acres, I decide to develop it.
Yeah.
I put in a housing development. Now it's not open space anymore.
okay,
I owe all the back taxes.
no. You have,
That's how it was stated to me
I believe
40 years
it's,
ago.
I believe that it has moved to a graduated
Okay, so
penalty.
it's graduated, okay.
that's what I
But
said.
still,
Don't
it's,
think it
it's
was
not
original.
like a permanent thing. And as Valerie mentioned, the tax break is nice. The money you could make for developing is more. So, I see no reason why when this committee puts their proposal forth, planning and zoning, to not adopt the original thing that's stated in the minutes. 3 acres of undeveloped land should be the thing, regardless of where you live, regardless of the area. Because somebody's gonna say, yeah, I want to preserve this for 10 years and not use it for something else for 10 years. That's already gonna be in their mind before they decide to propose it. Now, I happen to know that Valerie wants to save land for a million years. But that's not true of everybody. And some people are gonna go, yeah, I've got 100 acres, I don't want my hands tied.
don't put it in.
And so they won't, you know, and there seems to be this concentration on the tax, when it's not the tax, it's what's the benefit to the town to have open space? And that benefit is huge. It really is huge in a town like this. Now, I know there are people in this town that would like to turn the town into Worcester, but I don't think that's the majority of people.
Yeah, I
in the
don't think
town.
there's many. I think you
No,
can probably
I'd say
count them
there
on
aren't
your
many.
2 hands.
There are some, but there aren't many. I think the majority of people want to keep this town just like it is. In fact, anybody who's lived here for more than 25 years wants to keep it like it is. Some people who just moved here going, why don't we have a movie theater? Well,
Okay,
something
so
else.
precisely what you're talking about is what we were trying to get for, get a feel for where people wanted to go, what they wanted, whether we want to do this. There's some more things that we've got to figure out. For instance, on that 100-acre parcel of land that you're talking about, if you've got a house lot on it, or possibly not, some of the towns require one house lot to be taken out of that and assessed at, what would be the right term, Paul?
As a building lot.
As a building
It would
lot.
be right, assessed as a building lot.
Or if there's a house on it, if there's a house on your 100-acre parcel, that house, that building, that counts as a building lot where the house is.
Right.
So there's, I don't know whether
Which is-
I lost
which
my
is the
train of
same
thought.
as what-
If I could jump in real quick, and I understand the language that was put in place. One of the questions that I would have in just a very basic 2-line paragraph defining open space. Let's say you have a 10-acre lot that's in open space and somebody decides that they want to build a barn and a workshop. Does that now terminate the entire benefit because this goes from open space, birds and deer type of land to now a productive use? So those are the types of things that we really, by oversimplifying this becomes problematic for an assessor, because some assessor may look at that and say, okay, this is a change of use, therefore open space is now no longer pertinent to this parcel. So having a very basic explanation of open space could become problematic for, future assessors or current assessors.
Does that help answer your question?
Somewhat. The one other thing that I would like to add, in this is when land does transfer through sale, inheritance, gifting, whatever, when it transfers. If land is already in open space, when you go to sell a piece of property, when you go to buy a piece of property, you say, what were your taxes? Because that's one of your considerations. If now you suddenly come in and boom, you get hit with taxes. I think in any transfer, if you purchase open space, the application for open spaces. Maybe the new purchaser doesn't want it in open space. He's intending to develop it into something else. But the option should be there as part of the transfer that you can apply for this, and it should almost be rubber stamped if they decide they're going to do it, to tie it up. You know, when they purchase it, because somebody might say, yeah, I want to own this beautiful 300 acres of land, but I don't want to pay for it as residential area if it's currently an open space. They want to leave it as open space. Their clock should start ticking, but it should almost get rubber stamped on the application.
Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but if land is in Public Act 490 open space, well, it will be, I mean, after we get this straightened out, and that land is sold to another individual, generally speaking, they would just have to fill out the paperwork to transfer, say that they wanted to keep it in open space. Is that correct?
Correct.
So
So if it's determined a parcel's in open space and a person purchases it, and nothing's changed on the land, even though the exemption goes with the owner, if nothing's changed on the lot, when that new owner takes control of it, they could apply for the exemption. And if it qualified under a previous owner, it stands to reason that it would qualify under a future owner.
So if it was a pre-ordinance piece of property in open space, would that be grandfathered when a new owner took place?
No, it runs with the owner, not with the land. That's what that means.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. But I'm now a new owner purchasing a piece of land that was in open space. But it was a pre-ordinance open space. It was open space from 1979. It's been an open space since 1979. I'm the new purchaser. I want to purchase it. I want to keep it as open space. But your new ordinance says it doesn't qualify anymore.
No, it doesn't. It says you gotta
You
fill,
haven't written your new ordinance. How do you know that?
I know what the state statutes say, and it says that you have to fill out another you fill out an application as the buyer that you want it to be there, and
Right,
then it'll,
and you say that. But under your new ordinance, that land doesn't qualify anymore.
So I can jump in as the assessor
thank you.
on that. It would not. If it doesn't meet the criteria for the new open space ordinance, it would not be approved.
So therefore, I'm suggesting that there be a grandfather clause for this transfer. There's a grandfather clause. And it was already in open space regardless of the new ordinance. The new owner can apply and have that preserved as open space if they choose. They don't have to apply, but they
Okay.
should be able to.
We
Yeah,
can,
Dave, actually, now that I understand where you were going with it, that has been part of sort of my thought process for when I go to eventually, write what the commission is going to review and see if they want. And it goes back to that some of these parcels are complicated, is to find the language that, captures as much of what was in place, regardless of what we go forward with. So, and I haven't written that up yet. I mean, first of all, none of the base decisions have been made in terms of,
Right.
which land
And I
qualifies
understand
and what
that.
are the
But
criteria.
you're going to be doing it.
Right,
And I
so,
want to shove this in.
right, and that's
And
why
you
I
can say-
started to do that, and I was literally with a Sharpie on a big copy of the zoning map, going parcel by parcel by parcel, to see where they were and what district they fall into. And yeah, it's gonna be a
Oh,
complex
it's
bit
gonna be a nightmare.
of piece of writing, for sure.
I don't envy any of you.
Yeah.
But it's something that should be considered for future transfers. As I said, inheritance, particularly inheritance, that's the one that bothers me the most. But transfer a gifting or purchase, somebody wants to purchase this and they go, yeah, this is beautiful, I would keep it just like this. And they go to apply and they get, but under the new ordinance, that's no longer qualified. It should be grandfathered.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to mention is, there are a few ways to preserve open space. Public Act 490 is only one of them. Any property owner can put a permanent restriction on their deed. If what they want is for it to be a permanent, which some people have said, I want it to be permanent. I'm not, Brenda, you said it. The tax break isn't important to you. The preservation is important to you. You don't actually need PA 490 for that. you can put a legal restriction on your property in perpetuity, whether you sell it, whether, you have nobody to pass it on to.
I understand that, but not everybody has the money to go to a lawyer and make that happen.
Well, true. I'm
Or
just
to
saying that
forego
there
the
are,
tax.
Not
I'm just
here
saying
for
that there are
myself.
options.
I'm here representing a lot of people.
Okay.
So, sorry, go ahead.
And also, sort of address that to me. Not everyone can predict the future. I've been trying for years and have been unable to, and I've worked as a professional magician and still can't do it. Nobody wants to tie up land that they might need for an emergency later. And you say, I can't ever do this, and then your spouse has cancer and is going to need $100,000 a year in treatment money, and you need access to it, and the only way you're going to get it is to use the land. A lot of people aren't going to want to tie it up like that. They'll say, yes, I want to do this open space for as long as I'm here. Once I'm gone, really, you've got no control what you do. Or once it's sold. You can try it, but you don't. Because the town says, eminent domain, we need that now. These are just things that I think that should be considered, especially in a town like this. It's kept its flavor for so long. And most of the people here love it here, and want to keep it that way. I think that this would, when this was adopted in 1979, it was done in good faith, with good intentions. I think those intentions need to move forward. And then anybody that placed it in that, when it's sold, the new purchaser should have the option of saying, yes, I still want to keep that way. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all.
Ray, I think you were waiting.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, on the forest land, they say 25 acres for the state statutes.
That's state,
Now, what is it for farmland?
there's not a minimum acreage.
There's no minimum acres for farmland?
But it does have to be
Right,
a
yeah.
production farm of some
Yeah.
kind.
Anyone, Valerie?
Again, if you wants to jump in, please do. Question for Joan, and I just want to jump up one thing quick, what Dave said. If we were to recommend language that was similar to what had been recommended and voted on and approved in 1979, the grandfather issue wouldn't be an issue, as far as I can see, because it would be the same criteria. It may perhaps need a little bit of specification to help Paul understand how to take land in and out on a lot if there's some type of development. Maybe there's that little addition. The question I have for Joan, and if not Joan, then maybe it's Paul, is in the situation we are in as a town where we do not have an ordinance and Paul is unable to accept an open space application at this time, is there any remedy for that for the people who lost out in the last however long this, and I think Paul, let us know how long you've been here, but I think that's how long people have no longer been eligible to apply for open space. Is there a way to remedy that retroactively?
Honestly, that would be a question for your town's legal counsel. I don't know how to answer that unless Paul has some insight into that.
I would concur with Joan. There's no case law that I've come across that defines this, but I can say that in most other assessment statutes, once a grand list is closed, any exemption that was not authorized at that point in time, or any statute that's written, very rarely do they go back to past grand lists, open them back up and allow for that exemption.
Bridge to cross after we get across this one.
Okay, anyone, any other questions? All right, I guess one of the comments that David mentioned, well, we discussed, somebody said something about in a lot that's in open space. Some of the towns require 2 acres, 5 acres, 12 acres. Some of them require it be at least twice the minimum lot size that you're applying for. Any of your thoughts on some of these? You have one house lot taken out, set aside, that would be assessed at a house, as a house lot. You got 300 acres of land and with a house on it, the house lot would, I believe, would be assessed separately.
It is, I can say that that's my case. I have 40-something acres that go with the houses that are on the property. I mean, it's split. Half of it is in open space, the other half is taxed as building lot.
Okay. These were the kind of comments we were looking to feel what the town wanted. Any of your thoughts on those types of things that we need to consider, especially for the open space. The farmland and forest land is pretty much in stone in the state.
You looking, would you like to maybe poll, is it possible to poll folks that are in attendance, that are here as citizens, to ask what if they were making a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission, what they would want to see? Would you want to see the 3 acres that we thought was in place prior to now? Would you want something different? What?
Any of your thoughts? Not being written in stone, but we'll take it into consideration.
Yeah, I agree with Valerie that I think we should move forward with it being the language that was originally written in 1979.
Okay, so 3 acre has to be 3 acres to be considered. 3 acres is
3 years undeveloped.
And there's nothing that says that people can't, split the use of their land, and like you were saying, you have half, that's open space. People could say, I'm gonna reserve this for a building lot. I mean, I don't think that it has to be differentiated within the open space, saying you must set aside an acre for a building lot.
We'll consider that. I mean, we'll weigh that in the discussion. I don't know whether everyone should pay pay for one building lot, regardless of the size, whether it's 3 acres or 300 acres. But
You saying a building, pay for a building lot regardless of whether there's development on that property or not?
on that acre, yeah, or acre, that lot.
Can I tell you why I applied to remove 1 acre?
Well, you taking the house
Because
down and there was no,
I took the house down and it's expensive to take it down.
So Randy, am I correct in thinking that part of your question is if it's a very, very large parcel, if the set aside should only be 1 building lot? Is that what you're trying to get at? Like you have to designate out more area, more specific area?
I don't know where I was going with that, to be honest with you.
I think that actually came about.
Could you give your name, please, so we have,
Angela Oppie of Riverside Drive. Kai's Orr had an example of putting a property, like you mentioned, rather than in open space or farmland requirement, they wanted to protect it long term. But in order to do that and to look forward for future generations, they might want to build other homes on their land. To be able to do that and not break the trust, they had set aside land to be able to use for homes.
Kai's is on the call if you wanted to clarify that too.
I think that was the intention.
Yeah.
That was part of what she had described at the last meeting as one of
Kai?
the conditions
Kai's is here.
go ahead, guys.
for sale.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Kaiser, 260 Aquatic Road. Sorry, I'm not at the meeting, been out in the barn, but, yeah, so we're going through farmland preservation. Farmland preservation is through, the state of Connecticut. And that farmland preservation, we've been going through this process. There's 4, we're obviously one farm here, but they consider each piece you preserve a different farm. So you got farm 1, farm 2, 3, and 4. We've been going through 4 sections of the farm since 2018. And we're finally just coming to the closing of 2 farms sections. And those sections, you have to cut out so much acreage. I think it's an acre for a house lot. But it's a lengthy process, and I can only hope for the future that it will be shortened. It's a great program, but you got to be patient.
Guys, that's PDR land, right?
Yep, farmland protection. It's
Yeah. All right, so that's
Not-
different than what we're talking about here.
correct, right?
Okay.
He's talking about a sale of development rights.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that
The
correct?
sale of development rights.
And so,
And the state has complete, I mean, you want to do it, you apply to the state and then they come out and decide whether they'll do it and
Yep,
Oh.
they assess the land, and you can't do anything. You can't like take down trees, or you can't do anything. You have to, in their assessing of until the development rights are sold, everything they've assessed it how it was when you first started.
but that's PDR and that's entirely different than what we're talking
Yeah.
about here.
Yes.
Any,
and just to address Angela's item around holding back a house lot, that's at your discretion anyway. So it's your discretion to keep something in an open space program or take it out. But if Paul's saying that he needs to have language that tells him that he can, if someone wants to develop a portion of a lot, of a parcel, that he can not take the whole thing out, just take the developed portion out. So that's, I think, what I'm hearing.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was, my comment was intending. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Paul.
Let
Paul,
Diana, because Dave has.
Just to follow up on that, I'm not sure if I'm confused or not, but you're not saying that every single parcel of land would have a house lot taken out and then the rest would be open.
I'm saying that some towns require that it be a house lot. I'm not saying anything about what we're doing here. We're trying to get some feedback so that we can put this together.
Just one person comes to my brain, Kirby Cordes, 800 acres, a lot of frontage. So, if you were taking a lot out of, and a house lot, and I'm sure Paul can confirm this, a house lot is valued at, whatever they go for, $50,000, $60,000 versus excess acreage is really minimal, normally. So
See, his land is
you're
all,
gonna- yeah, if you pull a house lot out of every piece that would go into open space, you're still gonna get nailed with that. And maybe Paul can speak to that too, but.
Right, the value right now of our residual land's about $1,900 an acre, and a building lot's right around 45,000.
Yeah, some of the towns do phrase their requirements as, for example, it would have to be double the minimum acreage, but it's only that doubled portion that counts. So towns have done different things depending on what they determine their needs to be.
But you're not talking pulling out a house. We were.
I just was glancing down the list of what some of the other towns have and what they require. Some require a house lot, taken out. But in the grand scheme of thing, if you're talking about a house lot out of 50-acre parcel, it's better than paying the taxes on the whole 50 acres.
Oh, for sure. I know what you're saying. Yeah, I know.
In the polling people on top. Answering the poll. I've always been a path of least resistance and don't reinvent wheels kind of person. The less work I have to do, the better. Not that I'm lazy, I'm not, I just.
You're
Yes, it's
efficient.
good work doesn't need to be done. If you codify what was decided in 1979, you saved yourself a lot of work, and you're not going to get backlash from people whose land is currently in open space under that. You got the 3 acres, you got which was pretty much the requirement, 3 acres of undeveloped land. It's simple, and there's no reason to not codify that. You can make that your ruling, make that your.
We can make that our recommendation. There's Inland Wetlands
Right.
and Conservation Commission, the selectmen, the
Understood.
assessor.
But if
We've
you
got
follow
to-
that proposal of let's adopt this as our thing, rather than saying, like you're sitting here saying now, should we do what this town does, what this town does, what this town does? I'm saying propose to do what you've always done
Okay.
since 1979.
So let me just add this into it as a slight complicating factor. And without sort of naming any names, I have had some conversations internally. I think that if the threshold is set for new parcels at less than 5 acres, it might have difficulty passing. But I agree that anybody who would have participated should be included, and that's the task that I would have is to find the balance. But whatever it is, you want it to be something that will pass all 3 levels of scrutiny. And I think that you might have a challenge of it passing one of those levels of scrutiny if that threshold for new enrollees is less than 5 acres.
Why is that?
Well, I don't want to reveal too much of the conversation. I'm trying to give you guys the best chance of success, right? Because I agree that there is value to this program. We had some folks, I think you guys were in the last Ag Commission meeting, I know Dickie was, and then there was somebody else who isn't here tonight, who seemed to me to be exactly the kind of person that we wanted to capture with this program. This individual, bought land here with the intention of farming in the future, but can't quit her day job now. But the amount of land that she purchased is unsustainable unless she can get the exemption. To me, that's the exact purpose that this thing was set up for, and we want to enable that. On the flip side, there are certainly people, and you have to consider this, who could use this as a tax shelter, right? Who have no intention of doing anything but selling it after the 10-year minimum period has expired, and you haven't preserved anything. So there are pitfalls, and I'm not saying that we should use the pitfall as an example. I think you just need to be aware that there are pitfalls.
I'd like to speak. I've tried to speak about 3 times.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. The logical thing to do and the safe and honorable thing would be to grandfather those people who have been in the program. I agree that for the sake of continuity and the least administrative burden is to keep the language as it has been since 1979. The reason that people are concerned and are speaking up sometimes a little with some passion is that it seems now obvious, especially with the conversations tonight, that there there is a move afoot to increase the acreage and to be more restrictive. So the first consideration is we're talking about private property here, not public property. So the three entities, they can't make decisions about private property. They have to honor the private homeowners. They could make
Who are you
decisions
talking
about property that's owned by the town. But to say that it may not pass three entities raises concerns and suspicions about what's behind that. And those questions should be answered. I believe it was Valerie who said why when it was said that it would have to probably meet a threshold of 5 acres. Well, this is all about public policy in Thompson, and those questions should be answered. Each of the entities should be accountable for what they're thinking, what is behind their motivation to change the acreage, what is behind the motivation. It would strike me that there is an interest in increasing development that would not be acceptable to most of the property owners. So I think it behooves everybody to be open about what is the motivation behind this. The other thing that's peculiar is that if we've been doing this for nigh on to 43 years, is that why all of a sudden, I know it's been tried to be explained, but it's still, why is it that it's like it's seen as an opening to exploit at this point, as opposed to, all right, we'll make it official. Just what we've been doing, we'll make it official. But now it looks like people see this as an opportunity to alter things. And that's what has people very suspicious and concerned. So I suggest you grandfather it in, you keep it simple, keep it at the 3 acres, and keep in mind, we're talking about private property. And even if that person was looking for a tax break for 10 years, and then they sold it, well, that's their business because that was their private property. They had a deed for it. They paid for it for 10 years. It's private property. And no one that is either elected or unelected should decide what that person does with their private 10 acres. So please move forward with it grandfathered in, keep it just the way it is, and everything will be calm in town. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Sally.
Is it based on your assessment of looking at the map and just saying?
The individual who expressed the concerns to me that it might not pass essentially was concerned about the impact to the tax base and the grant.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, I pretty much know.
Is John? Is John still with us?
Yeah.
Can she speak to the finances around this?
The finances around which?
The
Tax revenue versus expenditures.
Well, Paul can probably do that better, but
and then
you
you
on some of the other towns, there's a survey, land that is under 490. It costs the town like 30 cents on the dollar for what it costs the town to service that land, whether it's fire or whatever. A house is, and commercial or business was actually just a little less than agricultural and open space land. Yes, it was. And houses are is about $1.15 or $1.20 for each dollar they collect in revenue.
Yep, I think I've got it. Bear with me, guys. I'm going to do a screen share, and I got to find where I put it. It's not it. I'll find it.
Well, she's looking. Paul, you want to speak?
I think that Tara was trying to bring it up. I did an analysis of just the parcels that we currently have valued as 490. And it equates to about, as opposed to what it would be assessed without the 490 value, we lose just under $600,000 on the 490 land taxes. That roughly is slightly higher than the combination of all other exemptions in town. So to kind of get it just from a tax perspective, you're looking at a very significant, it's about 0.8 of a mil that is the revenue that's lost due to 490 valuation.
So I don't know if you guys can see that. This chart is actually included in the update to the POCD that we adopted last year. Both commercial and agricultural lands compare very favorably in terms of what they cost the town versus tax collected. So that is absolutely true. This one doesn't show open space, but I think there are some that do. This might be easier for the people actually dialed in to see than the people in the room, but this is laid out as dollar collected versus dollar spent, residential, commercial, industrial, and working in open lands. So that would be agricultural and open land. So in Windham County, you can see for the average dollar spent, average dollar collected by the town, $1.15 is spent by towns for resident services to residential properties. For every tax dollar taken in, 24 cents is spent for service on commercial and industrial. And here in Windham County, the working in open lands compare most favorably. $1 taken in, 19 cents.
And that's the town of Windham, not Windham County, but
Did you say
Oh, yeah, that's right.
19 cents spent?
yes.
Yes, so it compares very favorably.
Yeah.
That's right, and that is the town of Windham, not the county. Joan, did you want to add to that?
No, I was just going to refer to what's called the cost of community services studies, which is what you just highlighted, Tara. So bottom line is that your 490 land, while you don't collect as much in revenue from it, it also doesn't cost your municipality nearly as much to support that land base, because the bottom line is you're not developing it for residential purposes, which generally increases the amount of demand on your municipal services as well as your school systems.
Thanks, Joan.
All right, unless somebody else has some questions.
Oh, yeah, Dickie was waiting, I'm sorry.
Richard Bergman was a road, 3 acres is 3 acres. And then you throw out 5 acres, and if someone won't pass it, that it may not pass, how do you know? How do you know that it may not pass?
I know that there are concerns with it passing.
How could be on the side with other boards discussing it? Is what you're telling me. It's always been 3 acres, so why change? Why change any of it?
All I'm saying is that I'm trying to give
It's
you
just
the
it's
best
just-
chance
the average
of getting
person sitting out there,
this
when you throw
passed.
something out like that, it means you're having discussions with other people on other boards already. They don't know that it won't pass.
Exactly.
Town staff does in fact discuss town business during
But they
business
shouldn't
hours.
be making the decision by themselves. They shouldn't.
Well, that's actually what we're here to do, and I'm just trying to give you advice.
Telling
All
us
right, that's,
that it's gonna be a problem. You're
I'm
already
giving you
telling us.
no,
advice.
you're being a problem. Now,
No, she's not being a problem. You're the board.
We're
She's
here
got right
to
to
listen
speak.
to the people.
well, all right.
She can be
Okay.
aggressive if she wants.
I'm worked up because everything in this town that's happening is underhanded somehow. And there are so many people that just feel so much distrust for our town government. I don't think you guys realize what's happening. I really don't. You talk as if you have all this power. Listen, we pay you. And if you're elected official, then you're working for the people. And yeah, you can say, we elected you. But I'm going to tell you right now, the things I've learned in 4 months is the people that I used to vote for, they are not what I thought they were.
Okay, we've got
So let
other
me
people.
just
So
phrase the
everybody
question
is
to you in a
concerned.
different way.
Everybody is concerned. For you to
I
say
hear you.
3 to 5, it's not going to pass. Who's not going to pass it?
I hear you. Let me phrase the question to you in a different way. Let's assume that based on this, what I write up, what gets passed into the planning and into the plan of conservation and development is exactly what you've asked for, and it goes to one of the next steps and it doesn't pass. Then what have you gained? You haven't gained anything.
What next
All
step?
I'm
What
doing
is
is giving you
what next
advice
step?
into what I think you're going to have the best chance of getting a result
What
from.
is the next
But
step?
you can disregard that. I'm just giving you advice.
The next step is going to the planning board. That is
The
the next
first
step.
step. Well, the
First
next
step
step
is-
after this.
First is by us, and first of all, we are not elected, okay? We volunteer for this,
I was-
okay? Okay? We volunteer for this. So we are here, okay, to make it better for the townspeople, for you, by discussing and trying to bring this forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. That is our purpose here. We're not here to change anything to benefit us, all right, but the people from the town, okay? That's why we're here to do this, all right? And take abuse, okay, and saying that we're doing certain things to benefit ourselves, that's not why we're here for, okay? So I think what we need to do is vote on the motion that Valerie has proposed to us so we can continue forward with what we need to do.
Joan, I do see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And I would let Paul, your assessor, weigh in on this as well, only because I've seen this happen in other towns when there's been a little bit of a conundrum over open space, very similar. It was there all along, and then somehow something wasn't solidified as much as it should have, and then the next assessor comes in and has to sort of iron out the problem. I would just lend a word of caution to changing what's been there all along since 1979, because the poor assessor, whether it's Paul or whoever else takes his place in the future, as time goes on, you're going to have parcels where some of it met the 3-acre threshold, some of it met the 5-acre threshold. The poor assessor has to try to navigate all of this, and you might be better off if you don't have a problem, don't try fixing a problem you don't have, and just leave. If the 3 acres has been working all along, then maybe leave it that way. There's consistency in the way the parcels have been assessed all these years. It creates less problems for assessors in the future as these parcels transfer out or are sold. At the end, you folks decide whatever you think is going to work best in Thompson, but I have seen problems when the rules sort of change midstream, and then down the road, assessors have to try to figure out why some parcels had 3 acres and some had 5, and it just causes more of a problem in the future sometimes.
Thanks,
Just
Joan.
a little word of caution.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lynn had her hands up, but I don't have to
Go ahead, Lynn.
Blackie to recognize her.
33 Randall Road. Our land is an open space for several reasons, not just the tax rate, but we want to preserve our land, and we use our land as open space, a lot in farmland. I think it should stay as 3 acres as it was originally made in 1979. And I would be interested in a couple things going forward. I would like that anyone who is in this program be notified of future meetings so that we can attend and express our views on this. I'd also like to find out how many
how many parcels are exactly at 3 acres, how many are, 5 or 10 or, or more. I expect most of them would be at more than 3 acres. I don't know if the 3 or 5 acre thing would really come in a lot. I think we need to, that Joan mentioned from other communities as a guideline to creating our ordinance here in Thompson. I think that several people like me really value the open space and the environment that we have in Thompson. And with enough outreach, we would support these ordinances and this change going forward. I think we can clean this up and move forward as a town.
Thank you.
Okay, question for Paul.
I
Sure.
could to talk to Lynn's point, I can create a chart to see what parcels we have and what the acreage totals are for each and chart that.
And Paul, my quick question is, how many requests have you had for new property to be put into open space?
I've had 2 tax cycles and I believe it's around 12.
And were they granted or were they all denied?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Were they granted or were they denied?
They were the ones that did not qualify under the farm or the farm or forest portion of it were denied. So I believe there were
And do you know how many that was?
2.
2. Okay. And do you know how large those parcels were?
The one parcel was just about an acre, and the other parcel I believe was like 2 3/4.
Okay, so both were under the 3 acres.
Both were under the 3 acres. One, Valerie's parcel was a 1 acre chunk out of a larger parcel, so that one was slightly, we were only
Okay.
approving one piece, but.
That was looking to append to an open space. with new
Right,
open
that one
space.
would, right, so that one would have incorporated above the 3 acre limit, as it was the 1 acre that was asked to be approved was part of a much larger piece.
And that piece is larger than 3 acres.
Correct.
Right, and so what? So I don't think the 3 acre, if you go and look at everything, I don't think you're gonna see a lot of 3 acre lots. I think not changing the wording, adopting what was codifying and adopting what was there in 1979 is gonna save a whole lot of headache. And if everybody that isn't aware of what's going on now suddenly becomes aware of it, what I don't want to see is a repeat of September's meeting over open space. If you say this is what's always been, let's just make it official, you're going to save a whole lot of problems. And I don't think that the 3 to 5 acre, what you're talking is a pittance as far as what taxes go. Somebody's really saying, no, those extra 2 acres are going to make it's going to be $18 million. They're lying. It's simply not true. I don't think that many people with small parcels are looking for the open space. I really don't think it's that big. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more small comment, please.
Yep.
In that proposal, I would recommend that the entire town be included. Otherwise, it's going to appear that there's an attempt at central planning by a very small group of people going on that are not honoring the heritage of the town, nor its people, nor the private property in it. So I believe the entire town should be eligible and be grandfathered in. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll consider it.
If I may, just to help with Lynn's recommendation, if I could ask, and maybe it's Paul to go through this because he presented it, I felt really well at the last agriculture meeting, the reason for the timeline and what the timeline would be that we're under, and maybe Tara, you have it already documented, but I know Paul laid it out very clearly last time. I'd like to let other folks hear why there's such a tight timeline.
Yeah, well, there's two timelines, but Paul's is the more important one.
So our timeline is for the application process. So the assessor statutes say that you have 30 days prior to and 30 days after the assessment date to apply for the PA 490, which means the application period runs from September 1st through October 31st. So the reason that we need to move quickly on coming to a resolution is because the dates that the application period for the 490 program is very small. And the faster we do it, the easier it is to transition to the approval process for this grand list.
Yeah, so the other piece of that is what then is the procedural timeline, which is what we started tonight. So my intention, as the person who's going to be doing the writing on this, is that, you know, some consensus is reached tonight as to what conditions are being written up, which then I would again ask you guys to review a draft to present to planning and zoning for approval of an amendment or an addendum to the plan of conservation and development, because that is required by statute that it be referenced in the plan of conservation and development. So my hope is to get that to the P&Z by the February regular meeting, which is the 28th, I think. After that, planning and zoning then passes it to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen has to agree to what the Planning and Zoning Commission approved, right? So that's their step. Assuming that they do that, they also have to engage the Ordinance Committee to work on the ordinance, and I would probably be a part of writing that as well, so that they could have an ordinance to approve by, I think it was the end of March. And Amy, you can correct me there if I'm wrong on that timeline, but I think this is what we worked out by the end of March, so that it would be ready to go to town meeting, because an ordinance is required to be voted on affirmatively, you know, to be passed at a town meeting. And our annual town meeting is in May. So it is a very tight timeline. Oh, that's a thumbs up that we got it right, Amy. Thank you. I think we can get it done. And whatever consensus, you know, the Agriculture Commission and the Conservation Commission, with whatever input for the public comes back with, that's what I'm going to write up and see where it goes from there. But, you know, I don't have approval authority, right? All I can do is write it and make recommendations. And when I give advice, even if it seems to be advice that maybe you don't like, I'm just trying to read the landscape and give you the best chance of success. You know, I think that there's a lot of value in this. I think there's a lot of value in a lot of programs that would preserve open space, including if you really want to preserve something permanently, to consider actually restricting stuff on your deed, which does not require a public act. That's just a private property owner taking action. So there are different tools that can be used, and this is one of them. And we want to make it properly available to people so that new people can be enrolled, you know, in a way that benefits the town. Diana?
Just a remark on the acreage and what might be accepted. I mean, we've got Joan recommending that it doesn't get changed, just so that there's not an issue for Paul for 3 acres and 5 acres or whatever it's going to be. And I think whoever, if this is going to next, should really look at the fact that Joan is recommending, leave it the way it was.
Hey, believe me, I take Joan's recommendations very,
I
very
do too.
seriously and very
Yeah.
highly. Like I say, I'm just trying to read the landscape in front of me.
Well, maybe they need to be aware of her recommendation.
So back to parties. I don't feel as though I made it in the form of a motion. Shall I make a motion?
Yes, please.
I would like to make a motion that the Agriculture Commission and Terry, you're more of a wordsmith than I am. So if you ask for help on this, but that we recommend the language that was used in 1979 to be eligible for a lower assessment on their land through the open space classification via the statute, Connecticut statute referenced, as Joan recommended, that we always reference that. And it be 3 acres of undeveloped land. And that we add the wording to allow the assessor and the landowner to remove buildable lots as appropriate and not change the classification on the entire lot.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, question. Are you talking about making that change down the road? I mean, as far as,
Yes, at the landowner's request. Buildable lot at the landowner's request.
The change to the wording, are you talking about making the change after the fact or in this?
he's talking about, I think that you're saying that you want the assessor to be able to take a house lot out 3 years down the road, or is that what you're saying?
I would like the assessor to be able to take out a portion of the lot when the landowner requests that.
Okay, so this is in the application, not halfway through not 5 years down the road. It's,
At any time.
well, I think that,
So we need to word it so that if I'm in open space, and I've been in open space for 11 years, so there's
and you
no.
don't matter, you can, there's no
Please let me
penalty.
finish.
Excuse me.
I've been in open space for 11 years, so there's no penalty to me to develop a portion of the land. If I want to build on an acre of my 50 acres, Paul has the discretion that when the landowner requests to carve off a lot to be built, he has the discretion to not take all 50 acres out, just to remove the buildable lot from the open
Right.
space.
So I think the clarification on that, sorry, Paul Hopkins, is that at any point after the original application, a person can come in to amend their application to remove a piece of the land as long as the remaining land meets the ordinance requirements. So if somebody has 20 acres and they want to come in and 10 years from now, or 11 years from now, they want to remove that 1 acre building lot, I can just remove the 1 acre building lot and leave the remaining lands untouched.
That's what he can do that now, and that's the way you would do it now.
Is that how you administered it in the past, Diana?
There would have been a penalty.
No.
If it was
After.
within 10 years.
Oh, this is
Yeah, after.
outside of
Oh,
the 10 years.
after? Oh, yeah, there was never a big
And,
deal.
and that was just my example. They could come in
yeah,
and
yeah.
incur the penalty at any
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But I was
And
using
not
examples.
jeopardize all the land, just jeopardize the one parcel you're taking out.
So under this, there could be confusion down the road if somebody because it's a change of use. So open space as defined is generally space that's undeveloped and untouched. However, if somebody decides to put a workshop, that parcel now has a change of use and could be, and I've seen this happen, the parcel could be denied the open space. So we need to define, I think it would be just another further clarification to save a headache down the road where you say that a parcel can have the whatever acreage taken out down the road without requiring a whole new application on the existing land.
I think I see what you're getting at anyway, Valerie. So if you guys want to vote on the motion, I'm going to have to write it up anyway. So Paul and I are going to work on it, and then you guys are going to see a draft. So I've got the gist of what you're after.
That helps. And Paul, thank you for helping clarify. And I guess I'll just throw in an example. If I want to build a barn on my pasture land and I want to build a shed, I don't want to lose my open space exemption because now I'm sheltering my horse, who's not my business. I want to make sure that people can do that and not lose their open space, and I want to help make it clear for Paul.
Joan?
Yeah, two things. It's my understanding, and Paul, you can verify this, that with any of the 490 classifications, if the footprint of any land that's classified changes to a use other than farmland or forest land and open space, then the footprint of that land comes out of the classification. If you're within the penalty phase, then the conveyance tax applies. What happens to the residual land would only be impacted if the residual acreage no longer met criteria. For instance, if you had exactly 25 acres of forest land and then you built a house on it in a 1 acre zone, now the rest of the 24 acres no longer meets criteria. So I would think if you had a 3 acre parcel and then you built a house on it, now the entire 3 acres comes out because you don't meet the criteria.
Right, so it's got to be land in excess.
Right, right,
Yeah, undeveloped land or land in excess.
right, right, exactly.
Okay, so had you finished? You got
Yeah,
that order?
I'm comfortable with what we've discussed. I made the motion, already seconded.
You want to state what you think you've got to write up?
I think that I am going to write up a recommendation for the Planning and Zoning Commission to add to amend into the current Plan of Conservation and Development, which essentially is the language from the 1979, well, it wasn't really an ordinance, the 1979 program, we'll call it, since it wasn't really an ordinance, with the clarification that the 3 acres is undeveloped land or land in excess to qualify. Yeah, is that close? Is that that's what you had in mind? Yes?
Double check with Paul if that works.
That works for you, Paul? Where? You lose him? Oh, he's there. He might have stepped away. It's going to be a draft anyway. Whatever we see is a draft, but that
Sorry,
is,
sorry.
I understand your motion.
Sorry,
Does that
I
work for
apologize.
you,
I
Paul?
did step away. I'm gonna plug myself. Today's my birthday, so I'm currently at my birthday dinner. So yes, I apologize for being in and out.
You should have told me that, Paul. I would have told you not to come in. That's terrible.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Should we sing?
No, thank you.
I know what you can give him for a present. You can vote on the motion so we can all go home.
All right. You understand the motion? There was a motion made. Is there a second?
Yeah, Art seconded.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Yeah, guys.
Kais?
Yeah, Kais.
Yes, Kais.
Okay, unanimous. Motion passes. I think we've got that covered. Is there anything else we need tonight?
I think we're okay.
Besides, it's almost 9 o'clock.
We need to set a date for.
Yes, we need to set a date for a follow-up. And it needs to be before the planning and zoning meeting of the 28th.
And I have dates of a Wednesday of February 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 23rd.
Folks may want to hear when the next meeting is for the follow-up.
Say it again, Martin.
Second night,
Excuse me just for a moment, please. We're trying to set a date for our next meeting, so we have February 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 23rd.
Yeah,
I
work
think
the
the
night.
9th would be the best. That way something can be drafted, we can look at it. I'll put in
next
I'll put
meeting
in
will be
February
tonight.
9th, yes,
Wow, that's really,
7 o'clock.
that really helped me.
Anything else come before the meeting? If not, I move the meeting, move the meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Can you just say when the meeting was set for?
Nine,
The ninth.
February 9th.
It'll be in the town. I have to post